Alright guys, welcome to, what is it called? What's the podcast called?
Bro, instigate me. We don't have a name.
The standard name is, that's kind of a mid-name. So, we'll think about it for the next episode, hopefully. So today on the episode, we're going to talk about, or we're just going to outline, the 5 W's of this podcast, of the Academy. So, Raymond, you can start.
Okay, so 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why, plus how. But I don't think we did a how. The what is, this is like a semi-intellectual podcast where we talk about ideas and stuff we're reading.
We're on what, right?
Yeah, we're on what.
What is the podcast? So we're 2 teenagers from the suburbs of Toronto, and why are we making it? The thing we have written down is we both find it difficult to find intellectual discussions in our everyday lives. So we're using it as a catalyst to talk intellectually in a more formal manner. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason is, or at least for me, I want to learn how to conversate better or have better flow in my conversations, because I sometimes just go talking and it's very incoherent. So by having this little thing to as an archive is good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I forgot what I said. So I used to be super into personal knowledge management. I read a lot of books and I want to remember the most amount of information that I gain from the books, because otherwise what's the point of reading? So then I was thinking, because sometimes when you have to explain concepts or you have to go into conversation, you have to distill the knowledge that you get into a more refined form, and thus it's kind of you're challenging yourself to put what you've learned into words. So I wanted to add that extra layer onto my own reading practice, so I hopefully do not forget what I learned and I can actually create something valuable with the information I consume.
Thank you, Raymond. I would say the same, but personally, I've not been reading a lot recently. So
you too?
I've been watching movies. That's my preferred form of entertainment nowadays. But I'm coming on a trip soon, or I'm going on a trip soon. So hopefully I get some reading done. Back to the main premise of the entire podcast. Not being able to find. Oh, thank you. Not being able to find intellectual conversations among people our age. The first topic, or the topic of this first episode is why is it so hard to find intellectual conversations? And then the first question we have asked ourselves is what is an intellectual conversation? So Raymond can answer first, I think.
Okay, so I think it's kind of hard to say what it is, but I don't want to make it this nebulous thing that we don't know. But I see it as, I don't know, what does intellectual mean? Well, I remember I googled anti-intellectualism yesterday, and then it was expressing distaste towards the arts, philosophy, or the sciences or something. And then I see an intellectual, is the opposite. So it's you don't express distaste towards the arts and whatever. Just a higher degree of sophistication in terms of the subjects you discuss. And I'm trying to say that in the least pretentious way possible. But yeah, I have something substantial to say on that.
Okay. For me, what is an intellectual conversation? I think in layman's term, you could probably say deep conversations. But then I think a lot of people experience deep conversations in their daily lives, talking to their friends, and they always have those moments where oh, bro, this is super deep. But then I find that everyone's perception of what is considered a deep conversation is very shallow in a sense, because I know Raymond had something to say about this before, but it was something along the lines of or more specifically, as like teenagers living in North America, specifically like near a big city, like in the suburbs area, your experience as a person is very similar to like most people around you, and it's very like undiversified, like you said. And then your understanding of like what is deep is kind of like projected on by those experiences. But since everyone like experiences the same thing, you have this like phenomenon where like people just assume when like you talk like beyond like normal conversation, it's like it becomes deep. But then oftentimes like people just like talk about like, oh, existentialism, like, oh guys, we are like really small in a big world, and then like in a way it's like very surface level, because like these are topics like people like philosophers have like talked about for many decades, many centuries, and like you're kind of like going in a circle. And Raymond had like something about like why that occurs.
Yeah, we could talk about that later.
Oh,
I want to save the topic. I find maybe it's not difficult. Maybe we're just bad at talking and articulating ourselves. But maybe it's easier to say what is not a deep conversation, or like what is on the verge of being deep, but it's like actually pseudo deep. Where it's like these conversations where guys are like, "Damn, that's deep," but really, bro just said, "The Earth is large."
Yeah, and I think like even like when you there's like topics about like regarding like one's like introspection, like they're talking about like themselves and their feelings. I feel like there's a lot of like loops, and like people like can only go so deep because their experience allow it to go that deep. And then it kind of becomes like when you hear or when you're talking to some people, it, even though like to someone else it may sound like super profound, like, oh damn, like school is bad because Gary Vee said that university is a scam. And then like people say, oh, that's like deep because like you're like contradicting like societal standards, and it's like, damn, that's like deep. But then like in reality that's like I would say like extremely surface level. Like that's like the beginning of the rabbit hole of like intellectual exploration. So yeah.
What do you think defines a conversation that seems to be deep on the surface, but in reality is not? Like, what are like some characteristics?
I think like how like I don't think it's like there's a correlation, or like there's like a direct correlation. Like it's like, oh, if this is this. Like oftentimes you'll find like mainstream concepts like extremely like not deep, in my opinion, almost, because you have like these like influencers who like push a certain idea, and then you take it and then you like discuss it with your friends, and then like I feel like it's not deep because then you're just like regurgitating information that you like consumed. So there's like a theme amongst like I would say pseudo deep conversations that are sort of just like regurgitations of like what, let's say, who's like a famous like self-help person,
like Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson would like see something like, I don't know, like, oh, this is probably not something like Jordan Peterson said verbatim, but like something about like women and like their roles in society and things. And then like you would have like a group of friends who watch Jordan Peterson, and then they basically just like talk about what Jordan Peterson said, but then like there's no like intellectual development. They just like, yo, so basically he said this and like it's a fact, and then like, damn, that's deep. But then like in reality there's no like you're kind of like summarizing what another person said. Yeah. But I feel like in order to have like a deep conversation about it, you would need to like be introspective. Like you need to like figure out like why you believe this, or like why this person said that, and then like critique it. Whereas like a lot of people just like they take it as is, and then they like spread it as if it's like the Bible. So yeah.
What do you think? Because wouldn't you be able to do that if you were to read like Socrates or no, he doesn't, like Plato or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just regurgitate what Plato says.
Yeah, I would say that's also like, I think that the main difference is like how mainstream it is, like regarding like certain topics, but like I think like that's another aspect of an intellectual conversation. Like you just regurgitating what another person said, is like not, I don't think it's like great, but like that's not to say like through like the process of thinking like you come to the same conclusion, like just because let's say you read something about Plato and then like you critique it and then you talk about it and you have like intellectual conversation, just because like you talk about it a lot and then you have a conversation about it and you come to the same conclusion, it doesn't necessarily make it a non-intellectual conversation. But it's at the point where like you take it and then you just like say it and then like you just like talk about what you just said, like in a non like developing way, then it like is not intellectual because you are just summarizing what another person said.
So the content that you're discussing doesn't matter in so much as what you do with it.
Yeah, like I think yeah, like what you said, like just because like even if a topic is like not deep, like someone could talk about Jordan Peterson and like have an intellectual conversation about it. Like just because it's like mainstream and stuff doesn't necessarily make it a non-intellectual conversation, but like it is oftentimes that you have people who like consume media through like TikTok or YouTube, like these very like consumable pieces of entertainment, and then regurgitate it, and then it's perceived to be like profound, and then it's like not really, because like you just watched a video on Jordan Peterson like shitting on a liberal, and then like you're like, damn, liberals, thumbs down, like that.
I think you have to engage with the content, and maybe a reason why our second topic, it would be why is it difficult, or why do we think that it's difficult to find conversations like this? I think maybe another reason would be the proliferation of social media, because stuff like TikTok, like YouTube is slightly better in the sense that it's long form information and the algorithm isn't as on you as TikTok, but TikTok is kind of like you really don't have to engage with it at all. You don't even have to like it. You just have to watch the video, and then there's not really much thought that goes into it. So I think maybe if that, like, since that has become the norm in terms of media consumption, it has led to a dearth of engagement with information.
Like I remember like ironically, like on a TikTok, it was like, oh, we're in an age of information, but then there's like a lack of like engagement with the information. I know like the context of that video was like, oh, everyone can learn anything and like read about everything, but they don't have like the will to do it, or to the will to apply it to their lives. I feel like this applies to like just general like gaining of knowledge. Like people can just like read about the surface ideas of like certain topics. So like an idea would be an idea would be in the fitness community where like people like watch like a 1 minute video on let's say what are the most optimal workouts, and then it is like they watch it and then they consume it, and then there's like you just take it as is, and then when you like prescribe this information to your friends, like, oh, this guy said this lat pull down is like optimal because so and so, there's like, even though that's like more related to science, you kind of just like take it as is and then you just like regurgitate it. Whereas like you don't really have a conversation on like why this is optimal, or like what are you training for, and then people just take the information as like face value, whereas it requires a lot of like actual understanding on the topic for it to be like useful in a way that's like not like, oh, this guy said this, therefore it's like correct, and he sounded smart when he said it. So yeah.
So how do I describe it? It's like, I think the what's the study of knowledge in philosophy?
I think epistemology.
Yeah, epistemology.
So. Yeah.
I think the epistemology behind like quote unquote deep conversations is one where you need stronger logic, and then maybe you grab the claims from like empirical evidence rather than the pathos or the ethos of Jordan Peterson, who says capitalism good, I like right-wing media.
Yeah, like I think also, like, this is very unprofound. Like, this is like I'm criticizing like intellectual conversation, and now I'm like partaking in like non-profound ideas. But like, I think like a common like issue is like attention span. Like, I don't have the attention span to like watch a very full-length video on a certain topic, or like ideally read on it. Like, there's like the path of resistance is like very low for like certain pieces of information, and then there becomes like because everyone takes like the path of least resistance, like people end up having like the same like topics, and then it becomes like a circle jerk of information. Like, everyone just like say something and then they agree together. They're like, I don't know what's a topic that I could use as an example, but like, I feel like when you don't engage in a deep conversation, but it's perceived to be a deep conversation, it oftentimes is just like, again, people regurgitating, and then also like the other person also like agreeing, and there's not a lot of like questioning or like Socratizing your opinion. Like, you just like take it as is, and then like people are like, oh yeah, true, and stuff like that. And then because it's not practiced, and this goes into like the second topic kind of, when people like say, oh, I like talking about deep stuff, and then like they don't, and they have like this like they show like the thing I just said, where they just like agree and they talk back and forth, and it kind of is like there's no like learning, there's no engagement of the content. I don't know, I forgot my train of thought, but something about like people just like saying they want to have more deep conversations, but then like they don't really have a good conception of like what a deep conversation is like one of my experiences, I think.
Do we have a conception? I think we should come to a like definition of what an intellectual
Yeah, I feel like I've been speaking a lot of bullshit, but okay, to make it more formal, I think the one thing is the content does not necessarily matter, but there is a trend that content or knowledge that is easily like consumable in terms of like the way you like consume it, like what's like a very basic idea that you can take from like TikTok? Like,
just work hard and you succeed.
Oh, one thing is like investing. Like, oh, invest in the S&P 500. And like people just take that shit and eat it up and then like spread it. That's like a big thing, I think. So the topic doesn't matter, but however, there's a tendency for topics that are easily like related to your personal success and your general health, and like it's very applicable, like, and like you can like give it in like 3 simple steps on how to like succeed in this thing. Like, there's a tendency for those topics to be like non-intellectually engaging because the way you consume that media in of itself was like not ideal for like intellectual conversations, because it's just like very face value. And then on top of that, so the topic doesn't matter. What's the second thing?
Like, how much you engage with it.
How much you engage with it? How would you... Okay, so let's say I read something. How would you engage with that? Or like, is it like asking questions and things?
I think so, because like if you take the fitness example, you could take someone who says train this amount of sets per week or do this split, and then a way to engage with it would be to like try to actually read the papers, like the scientific papers behind it, or like use some kind of epistemology, like, you know,
okay. Some thought process.
Yeah, like you can take it and run with it, or you can go and verify the actual scientific literature, or you can connect these different ideas with like other things you read. Like after I learned about like fitness and progressive overload, and like the stress stimulus. So basically, when you work out, you need to like keep increasing the weight, because otherwise there's no reason for your body to create more muscle, because it takes a lot of energy to create a lot of muscle. So I could relate that back to something I read in another book called like Anti-Fragile, talking about how some systems benefit from more uncertainty than others, or like from more stress than others. And then you can relate that kind of to like how stress should not be chronic, in a sense. Like when you have chronic stress, you have bad health. But then when you have stress that's delivered in like semi-predictable patterns, that's like a bit, and then you get a period of rest, then you get like then you can recover and you get stronger. And that's also why I sleep.
Oh, that's why like sleep is like important in things. Okay.
Yeah, that like made sense, right? Did not make sense.
That potentially did not make any sense. But I get it because I read on fitness, but like I don't know if like someone who hasn't read on fitness understand like what the fuck that means. Like I understand because like I already know what you're talking about. But like I don't know if someone who doesn't know what you're talking about, like progressive overload, and like there needs to be a systematic like increase of like time under tension and like your overall intensity. So the intensity relating to like how many sets are you doing, how many reps are you doing each of those sets, and what is the weight. Like there needs to be like a almost linear, not linear, but there needs to be a increase over time of like those three factors of weights, sets, and repetitions. And then like someone who like how this relates back to like the like I guess the part 2 of like what is it non-intellectual, like you would see a video on like, oh, this is the most optimal like this is the most optimal workout split, like what is like the most optimal program. Someone might see like, oh, I should do a push-pull legs, meaning I do like 1 day of pushing actions, 1 day of doing pulling actions, 1 day of doing like lower body actions. And then like someone who doesn't engage in the content would just like see it and like, oh, this guy says, or Jeff Nippard says that I should do push-pull legs, which I don't think he promotes anymore. But like I think before, like that was like the mainstream thing where you would just do push-pull legs, and then you just do it, and like of course you like grow because like you're just like working out in general, but then the fact that you aren't engaging it and you just take the information as is, like not referring to like external sources or like another opinion, is like the one of the underlying issues, I think. You kind of, sorry for cutting you off, but you kind of like think about how it fits in with all the other information you gathered, or like all the other information that exists in the world. Yeah, I think those are the. So again, topic doesn't matter. You're not engaging with the information. Is there any other aspects to like making something like anti-intellectual? I think if it's like mainly derived from experience, like I'm for empiricism, but because everybody's experience is like pretty much the same, like we all go to school, we're all like in the suburbs. I feel like then those experience-based discussions are pretty much like pretty like lame, like not helpful. Yeah, it's just like, yo, just don't go for the girl, like girls aren't worth it, or like something similar like that. Oh, okay, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, like yeah. So if like I'm also like pretty for empiricism, if that's how you pronounce it, I don't know. Like how like your pleasure and shit, like whatever. But I think there's a lot of deep conversation where it's like, sorry, I saw someone was walking up the stairs. There's like a lot of conversations dealing with like purely like what you experience, and then like you just said, like girls. I think that's like one thing where people are like, oh, girls ain't shit, and like you should like go work out and shit, because like eventually the girl's gonna want you after. But then like because you look only within your experience, you come up with a solution that like it like could be helpful but also could not be helpful. Like for me, I think I've had like the conversation before where it's like, oh, the girl's not worth it, guys, and then like derives from that what derives from that conversation is like a hate or spitefulness against girls because a girl hurt like this person's like feelings, and then like there's a lot of like hatred stemming from somewhere. But like if that conversation was like less experience based, I would say something along the lines of like, oh, like you should like probably reflect and like figure out what you want to do, and like you probably shouldn't dwell on it because X, Y, and Z. Like let me think. If someone just broke up, a typical answer might be like, oh, or like not a typical answer, but an answer that might come up if like your friend group has all the same experiences, specifically like a suburb person living in like our age, where like whatever people, the typical answer might be like, oh, leave the girl, or she didn't matter, or she didn't love you, or whatever. Actually, no, not she didn't love you, but like something along the lines of just move on and like do something better, or like use it as like a catalyst to grow. I feel like at a surface level I would agree, but I feel like one of the end results of those conversations is like you kind of like don't believe in love, or you don't believe in like those like relationships, and then you kind of like you don't attack like the underlying issue, you kind of just like put it away for next time. And then like that's like potentially an example of like a deep conversation, but that's like not really deep, because like you don't really attack like the knowledge in this case being like the experiences of people. So like your friends have gone through a relationship and they're like, oh, just move on or whatever, but then you as a person partaking in the conversation, you don't really like think about why this person says this like thing, like why are you saying women aren't shit, like whatever. And then like because of that you just like don't have a good conversation, and like you don't like you get this like false sense of like knowledge, I think. And then something like that. I think I went on a slight tangent, but it's okay.
I think it's like where the knowledge stems from, because it stems from experience, but the scope of the experience is so small to where like realistically the range that you get from like me asking like someone else is like pretty much the same thing. And also we've barely had much experience gathered to where there isn't much you can like, there's not much perspective you can say on like university decisions or something. Whereas if you were to read like a book from like, I don't know, some author, like some 30-year-old, or if you were to read like something about like examinations in ancient China, then maybe you'd have a completely different perspective. And I think that's like how I would see tackling it in a more quote unquote like intellectual way. But I think we've spent quite a bit of time on the subject, and I still don't know what a intellectual conversation is, so maybe we can go to the next one.
Like what is your experience in intellectual conversations among our like age group?
Okay, so I think I started like November 2020, or it was like a while ago. I think I journaled once like, oh, I find it difficult to find people who stimulate me intellectually. And then back then my circumstances were like very different, because I was living in it was like the pandemic. I only really talked to like one group of people. But throughout the past year, I think it's improved a bit, but not by too much, to where I think still the main form of me, like I can consume all this information, I can learn a lot, but it's not like I have anywhere to put it into, or I have any like conversations where people like throw new ideas at me, you know?
My experience with this is like, or more so in the past, I've been like a person who like talks a lot, but then more so recently, I'm like a person who just like listens. Oh shit! Someone just honked a horn. I don't know if it was caught on audio, but more so recently, I've been like a more listening oriented. Like I just like listen and like cool, and then I think from that I've seen like a trend of like, which is like relates back to the first topic, but we're not gonna get on that. Like there's like a trend of people just thinking that whatever they discuss in a quote unquote deep manner is like super profound, but then what ends up happening is like, again, it's not very deep, and then I find that's very unhelpful. And then when you question them as in like the people who are talking or whatever, there's like a slight naivety, even though I feel like a lot of people believe that they're not naive, which makes sense. But they're naive to the fact that like maybe like one reason is their conversation stems, or like their knowledge stems from like their experience. or like their knowledge stems from like their single perspective, but they don't really see that, and they just see it as objective. Even people who like I see as like really smart people, like I know a lot of people who recently graduated. I talked to them before, and everyone definitely believes that they have like self-awareness, and like they understand like what's happening, and they like think about like they think in their head and shit. Like they talk to themselves about other people rather than like whatever. And like there is self-awareness, but then there's like not a self-awareness of the self-awareness. So then like you kind of disregard what other people say and shit, and then like because of that, people have, I feel like more so like in our age, you think that you know a lot, which like again sounds very like ironic, because I'm saying, oh, people think they know a lot, and like I'm acting as if I know a lot. But I think like people, let me think of an example. Example would be like, an example would be someone in high school who's like graduating, and they're giving advice to a younger grade. And then oftentimes I feel like a lot of like seniors or juniors giving like the advice to younger grades, like their advice is pretty garbage, not gonna lie. Like I've heard like, oh, you should join a shit ton of clubs, and like for the resume. And I think like on a very surface level, like you can just like agree with that, like, oh, that makes sense. Like colleges want to see, or universities want to see that like you're engaging in school, and not only academics, but like your community and shit. And then like people just take that and they're like, oh, I'm gonna join a lot of clubs, I need to put it on my resume. And like even though I think like the core idea of like joining clubs, like to meet people, to engage in a hobby that you enjoy, potentially to like find a career involved in the future, but like people will just give the advice like, oh, you need to join these clubs, and then you'll get into university. And then like you're not attacking the underlying issue. You are just like you're regurgitating the information that was told to you by a previous generation. And then another example of this would be like, a lot of people say, oh, if you want to go into business, you need to take business courses, which I think is the most bullshit thing ever. And I had a conversation with my friend where they're like, oh, universities are gonna like want me to take business courses. And then like, oh, my sister who just graduated like 2 years ago, they're in university, they told me that. And I'm like, no, you definitely do not. Because number one, I think like a lot of business courses within our school, I don't know, like if you're listening to this, you understand the context, whether that be you're not in our school board, or like you're not in our general area, or like you just never taken a business course. The business courses are complete garbage. I can guarantee you that, as a person who's like worked in those like startup type spaces where like there's a huge emphasis on like growth and like, oh, making money and like getting the best product, quote unquote. And like I can tell you, anything that like a person who's taken like 4 or 5 business courses, anything they've taken, like realistically is not applicable to any part of their lives. Like even in post-secondary. And then this goes back to like seniors and like juniors giving advice to younger grades. Like even though they have that seniority, like I've found very like not often, how do you say not often, very rarely is their advice ever like profound or like very like I think is the truth, quote unquote. But people just don't engage in like, oh, is this person really saying this correctly? They just say like, they just think, oh, this person is like older, like they have to know more than me. And then it becomes very unproductive, I think, and almost damaging to like the younger people, because like they take like this advice and like there's not much to think about it, because like this person has gone through high school, they're about to graduate, like I should probably listen to the advice that they've like accumulated through their high school career. But I don't think it's true. That's my experience. I don't know if there's any like follow-up to that, or if you like agree or disagree with like senior people giving advice.
I think when people give senior advice, I don't know how much better my advice is, to be honest, because I feel like my advice would probably be mid as well. I don't remember. like, I don't remember what I said last year, but I remember I gave advice last year. But I feel like the advice stems, like, it's pretty much what, like, a self-help person would say, like, be yourself, like, follow your passion or something. I feel like a lot of times it's something that I've already heard of, and when people like try to have these deep conversations, like I've been in conversations where it's like a group of people and I'm kind of there and they're like going super deep and they're like, yo guys, like money doesn't matter or something, and I'm like, oh, for real?
That's crazy.
Like, I feel like I've heard a lot of these things before, and maybe like it's not that I'm above these people because I've heard them before, but it's kind of like if you do a bit of digging into like the philosophical literature or like anything really, like if you read like Shakespeare, or like you read some other like classics or like some of the canon, I feel like you can already discover this very early. But it seems like this information is super like good because you can get it from self-help, but really self-help is just a regurgitation of the classics, and the classics are a lot more profound than that. But you get like a milkshake, like a pre-workout version of like of like what the classics actually have to say. And then I feel like also, since self-help just like says the same stuff over and over again, we get like a lot of the same thinking with these kinds of conversations.
Okay, wait, say that one more. Wait, say that last part again.
That's kind of freestyled off my head, but I think
something about like, because a lot of these self-help books say like the exact same things, like you often have like the same conversation and something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if
what does that mean?
That's kind of freestyled off my head. Because self-help itself is very stagnant in terms of because self-help is very stagnant in the history of what it's said, like over the 200 years that it's existed. It's pretty much been the same stuff, like follow your passion. I think I'm like not being completely accurate, but historically it's been pretty much the same thing. Whereas philosophy, you can really chart the change and like the evolution, the dramatic evolution of ideas from like the Enlightenment's focus on rationalism to like the Romantics response to that and their focus on like the emotions rather than the intellect. And you can see like there's so much graduate like difference in the ideas, whereas self-help has remained consistent and pretty stagnant. And the fact that most people consume self-help rather than philosophy, I think leads to the fact that like most people are not able to engage with a wide range of topics. Similar to like how when we talk about our experiences, it's pretty much the same thing. I think if you were to read like memoirs or something and you read about someone else's experience, you'd have something to contribute. It's just that like the experience that we get is pretty similar, and the ideas we engage with in self-help is pretty similar. That when you go into a kind of deep conversation, you've kind of heard a lot of the ideas already, and it's like cool, and you don't really have much else to say besides like cool, because it's what Jordan Peterson or like James Clear said.
Just because it's been stagnant, do you think like inherently that it's been stagnant for 200 years or so or whatever, that it makes it inherently bad?
I think
or is that like someone could argue, like devil's advocate, like, oh, the fact that it stayed the same so far like shows like how profound it is and how these ideas have transcended time itself or something. I don't know.
Well, maybe you can say that, but then you could also say stuff about like Shakespeare or like some other like classic. Like, why do we still read Shakespeare? It's because his ideas are so central to the human conscious that they have remained in our canon for like 600 years. But then self-help, maybe you can like I don't know, because you could probably make an argument and then maybe I would have a hard time arguing against you, but my argument is like self-help is based mostly on marketing, and these marketable ideas are like stuff that people want to listen to, I guess, and there's not much to debate on. Whereas like Shakespeare, they're like, or like the Bible, or like some other, like so many interpretations of these works.
Oh, so you think like potentially that because it's like so shallow, because of its like marketability, like there's like a correlation between its like marketability and like its like actual profoundness, that like it's like very hard to like critique it in a very intellectual sense because the idea in of itself is like not profound. So it's like the idea itself cannot be like, it's like very like not refutable. Like if someone hears it at face value, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I should do that. But then like because of the nature of like its marketability, like its marketability connected to like its its marketability connected to its consumability, makes it so the people who consume self-help don't necessarily like even want to like challenge those ideas. And even if they challenge it, they probably would go down like a philosophical route. Therefore, like the core ideas of self-help doesn't change at all, because the people who like are dogmatic about it don't care enough to like engage about it because like they don't need to, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. I don't know if that last part made any sense, but but yeah, that's it for like our topics. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
You talk about why is it hard?
Why is it the way it is?
Yeah. I think we glossed over it multiple times.
I think it's hard. It's hard to come across intellectual conversations because there's not really a importance on like being like connecting with like the content you're consuming. It just like you take it and then it's whatever, man. Something like that.
My theory as to why that is because within meritocracy and like capitalist culture or whatever, we have like standardized tests, and then because of that, like it the drive for success and whatnot leads information and learning to become, rather than like Platonic learning, which is learning for the sake of learning, into like Baconian learning, which is like Francis Bacon, like some philosopher. He said learning, like knowledge is power. And we're learning to gain power, or we're learning to get a leg up on others because our higher SAT scores. So it's learning as a means to an end. And then because of that, like when you go to school, you just like learn the information. It's like, I don't care why stem cells exist. I just need to get a good grade. So because of that thinking, maybe it translates over to like personal life, to where it's like, I don't need to learn why Plato thought this. I can just get the same like philosophy and like feel as good as before if I read like Mark Manson's version of what Plato said, which is complete trash.
Okay. Then why? Okay, so it stems from like a culture of like, oh, I need to learn for the sake of success. Like in order to be successful, you need to learn. Then let me think how to rephrase that. Like, you're saying people who are like, oh, I'm learning this because I need to learn it, like stem cells, right? Then there are people who are like self-aware that they're just learning about it, but then why do they choose not to do it? Like, I don't think like I agree that it stems from the fact that like, oh, they learn because they need to be successful, but like people have that self-awareness that they're just doing it for the sake of learning. So even though there's like the self-awareness for that, why do people choose to be like ignorant against like intellectual like Platonic learning?
It's like too much work, bro.
Oh, too much work?
Because I don't know, this is not a very profound thought. I think this has been said in self-help multiple times, but it's like school teaches you to learn, to memorize or whatever, and because people don't like school, people don't like learning or something like that. And then because people don't like learning, they don't end up reading like 6,000 pages of Marcel Proust's In Search of a Lost Time, because I wouldn't even read that, bro. That's too much work, bro.
So even though like they're self-aware about like their situation, they just choose not to because like the system just like even though you're self-aware of the system, like it's like, do you really want to like stem away from it, kind of, or not really? Kind of.
I guess like if we apply it to our situation, like if you ask like 100 boys if they read, I think like maybe 10 of them would say yes. And if you ask like 10 boys what they read, they would probably like 9 out of 10 would say self-help. Like,
I think those numbers are skewed, but like I get the gist of it.
You get the gist, right? So, where was I going with this? I guess why would you wanna learn, like, why would you want to read like a 3,000-year-old like Indian classic when you can read about like something that potentially gives you like that has direct carryover to your life, like Atomic Habits. Like, after you read that, like, immediately you can go on a run every day. But it's like the benefit of like reading the Bhagavad Gita or like some other like ancient book, like it's not as direct. And I feel like you have to cultivate an appreciation over time for these kinds of like intellectual stuff. Like if you look at a piece, like a painting, like by like Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
Like I don't even, low key, I can't even appreciate it yet because I'm not at that stage. Or it's like if I listen to classical music, I can't really appreciate it compared to like maybe listening to Tyler the Creator. And I think it takes a lot of effort to, one, cultivate that appreciation for it, and two, break out of like the social stigma of like you're a nerd if you're into like
philosophy.
Yeah, philosophy.
Okay. So do you think it's worth it as a person who's in that system to like cultivate that like appreciation, or no? Like,
I think it's definitely worth it.
Like, how would you like? So I don't know, like, because it's very unmarketable. Or how would you make it marketable? How would you make that appreciation of the arts, of the languages, like more marketable?
It is very unmarketable because I feel like the experience that you get, the profound experience that you get when you are able to appreciate it, is very difficult to translate into like an advertisement or something else.
Oh, okay. So in this case, the marketability of it does not correlate to like the goodness of it at all.
Yeah, like the benefit, right?
Yeah. Okay. I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the beginning problem of this?
Like,
or why this happened?
Yeah, why is it hard to find?
So to summarize, it happens because in order to have intellectual conversation, there needs to be a appreciation of the intellectual like knowledge itself. Like, can you say it better? I don't know.
Like, you have to cultivate an appreciation of the art, or
of knowledge itself.
Yeah, of philosophy. Like, love knowledge is like philosophy.
Yeah.
For that to like, for you to appreciate it intellectually and like want to search it out more, I guess.
Okay. Do you want to reword that one more time?
Okay. It takes a long time to be able to appreciate quote unquote higher forms of art or like media, like classical music, like paintings, like philosophy. And usually these are the things that you can go deep on and you can debate about and you can interpret in different ways in intellectual discussions. However, a lot of this stuff is so difficult to understand. Not to say like we're better than other people because we engage with this stuff, but a lot of this stuff takes so much effort and time that it's hard to see really any immediate value to it. And I can bring in like our current society's focus on instant gratification, and you could also link that to like how long-term gratification comes from like reading these like Shakespeare and learning like how he talked. Whereas short-term like instant gratification is like from reading Atomic Habits and instantly like running. Like the benefit is long-term and it's more obscure, and also not a lot of people do this stuff. So there are a lot of like social factors and cost benefit analyses that like it doesn't make sense to engage with intellectual things. But I think that is sad.
Unlucky.
Yeah, it's unlucky.
I think this conversation was pretty stimulating. I think we've like systemized our thoughts kind of.
Yeah.
So yeah, that went a little bit over time slightly, but wow, what a great episode! What a great first episode to start off the academy or whatever it's gonna be called. So you have any remarks?
I think my camera might have died, but hopefully it did. This went quite over time. This is like 20 minutes over time, but this was interesting to see how. I think I had an idea in my head and I think I could articulate it, and I started talking and I was like, what am I saying? I was like fighting for my life halfway through.
All right. I guess that concludes our very first episode, introduction. hope you have if you listen all the way through, that's crazy. But thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.